All right, so this is my dad, Mike McCabe, my interviewee for our Living Literature project. Let me see if I can get this figured out. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about literature. This is what we're doing. It's a project where it's explaining the importance of literature in the ongoing world. I pick graphic novels. I know you found that as a shock.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Okay. Oh, that's
This was just for
okay. All right. So our first question is kind of a softball. It's how often do you read?
All the time.
All the time?
Mm-hmm.
So do you do it before you go to bed? Do you do it? Because this counts as all things. This counts as newspapers.
Oh, then I read a lot.
You read a lot.
Oh, okay. I read very first thing in the morning every day. I read all of the reports and logs that go into the police department. So to give you a rough idea, there's probably 300 log entries a day. So I read them all, and if there are things called incident reports, arrest reports, protective custody reports, I read all of those and critique them, which doesn't make me everybody's favorite guy, but that's my job, so I do it.
So is it like grammar stuff, or is it like
grammar stuff, elements of the crime? You've got some folks that are listed in the report, but you don't explain why they're listed in the report. We need to have that for maybe court purposes or for some liability purposes later on.
Oh, like names and stuff.
Like names. So, like an example might be there are 3 guys listed on an arrest report that are listed as witnesses, but there's no attribute as to why those 3 people are listed on the arrest report, so we need to have those.
Okay.
But
so I'm gonna guess that's not what you like to read.
No.
So what do you?
Well, I mean, I do. Well, I don't mind reading them. I actually like to read them. But at night when I come home, I usually get my tablet out. Sometime around 9 o'clock. I go upstairs and I read all the news that's currently trending. There may be, 15 or 20 topics. It's usually, I think the browser is Bing. So whatever Bing is trending on is usually what I read. It's tough to read some of these because it's so one-sided, but I do.
Mm-hmm. So what are you reading right now besides like the news and the log reports and stuff like that?
Nothing right now because I'm in school. So I also have to do school preps, which involve lots of reading and lots of, I do, as you know, I do the papers with my students, and there's 25 students. They write about 10 pages. They write about 5 papers each. So that's 125 papers. So there's plenty to read.
Okay, yeah. So let's move on to like books and novels in terms of literature. So do you have like a favorite genre? I know you kind of turned me into a fantasy.
Well, I do. There are 2 different genres. I like nonfiction history, and I like fantasy novels. I got heavily involved, I guess, into the Lord of the Rings, and then when you were growing up, I got into the Harry Potter series, which I pretty much read them all religiously, and stuff like that.
I think I missed like 1 or 2 of those. I don't think I read all of them.
No. Which makes Tolkien my favorite fictional writer, I guess.
Would that be one of your desert island books?
Yes.
You have to bring 3 books on the island.
Sure. I would probably
we'll say series.
If I was going to do that, I would probably do something like read a book that I had never read before. But those would probably be classics. I'd read Shakespeare's plays, or I might read Othello, something along those lines. No, never did. Never read the Iliad and the Odyssey.
I have it upstairs.
Never read any of those. Oh.
Okay. Those were my world lit class. So we're just gonna pick out of the list. How do you feel that literature has helped you understand others? We'll start with
you didn't go to who's my favorite character.
Okay, who's your favorite character?
Well, I have 2. I have a nonfiction, and that is William Wallace, which started me into kind of world history and Western Civ, and then Gandalf would be my favorite character.
I remember you being really mad at Ian McClellan. at one point. So now, can I ask you? No. How has literature helped you understand others?
Oh, it's pretty cool. Even there's a series on television recently, the Viking series. And when you watch the Viking series and you're trying to figure out if these people existed or they didn't exist, when you start to follow those people forward into history, it brings you from, these Viking terrorists to people who basically set up Western civilization and what the feudal system was about, which also started with the Vikings in northern France. And it's pretty cool when you start to watch them. In fact, one of the characters in the Vikings is related to, I think, 75% of all of the monarchies in Europe right now, which is, so cool. Like I pick something and I try to find a strain and I continue to keep reading up on that.
Yeah. So, to follow up with that, how does it help you understand yourself? I know that it sparked a lot of our genealogy kind of stuff, like back.
That was interesting because when as part of my school projects, I teach basically a class that goes from 5,000 BC to about 1829 AD, and when I started doing that, I realized that I had to be sharper because if my students were asking me questions, I really did need to know something more about what the books were offering. So that led me into reading about the lines of England and from King John and King Henry and the three King Georges and how they interrelated with their people and what was going on. I turned into pretty much a Revolutionary War, then a Civil War buff, and then learning about myself or the family. It was much easier to relate what my family was going through because they were 14th century mercenaries and came over and fought on behalf of the British monarchs, and oddly enough converted to or stayed in Catholicism, even though that most of the folks in Scotland were Catholic, and but were fighting as mercenaries for the British Protestants. So, and then to kind of find out that they turned into be basically slaves of the English government from the 14th century all the way through the turn of the 19th century. It was, that was pretty cool. Pretty cool to follow.
You've drawn a lot of lines for him. Because one of, I think we go back and forth about the last EN11 was about social issues. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go back to softball questions.
All right.
So, what was the first book that you loved?
Call of the Wild, Jack London.
Okay. Any particular reason?
Loved it. I don't know. It was probably maybe 5th grade, I guess. I don't remember how old you would have been to read it. Maybe 10. It was probably the first novel I think that I ever read, and it was it was a great story, great storyline. And it was a boy thing. It was boys and dogs and sleds and races and how they interrelated and survived and that kind of thing. So, Call of the Wild. But you
wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite book that disappointed you? That's interesting. Maybe something about the ending just kind of turned you off to it.
I recently read probably all the books ever written on Whitey Bulger. And before that, I read, because I was part of an FBI task force, as you may or may not know, that involved Russian organized crime. I read 4 or 5 books on Russian organized crime, and the reason why it was disappointing is because it's always the same cycle. You have a group of immigrants that come over. They start at the bottom of the list, not unlike the Irish when they came over, and not unlike the Italians when they came over, the Russians came over. They had the same issues of assimilation, and then it's kind of like a never-ending story.
Yeah.
And then you watch the Whitey Bulgers, and you read his rise to infamy, we'll say, in the crime world. And when you're done reading it, I knew several of the investigators personally, and you watch the tolls that it takes on their lives, and you kind of say, is it really all necessary? Mm-hmm. So I guess Whitey Bulger, or might even be the Johnny Monterano, the Whitey Bulger's assassin. I think it was that book that bothered me because of the toll that it took on so many people. So.
All right. Well, thanks for answering my literature questions.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. 10 minutes, huh? 11. We got the bonus point.
Cool.
All right.
So you're satisfied with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.